Hey, Mark,
Hey, Dom.
how are you?
I'm good, buddy. Really good. Really, really good. How are you?
I'm really good too. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's nice to have you here on the podcast, even though it's a little bit strained because I come from the sales and operations side of the world, and you come from the dark side.
The dark side.
Do
Yeah,
we?
I'm the bad guy.
You're not the bad guy. Hey, everybody listening, Mark, rabbit ears for a second, bunny ears. Mark's on the bad side. I
uh,
mean, Mark, you and I have known each other because you do negotiation training, and because I do sales training and operations. Sometimes we cross each other in our professional lives, and you're a great guy. So I've
I
invited
am
you.
a great guy. I am. You're
Yeah.
right.
Hey, for those of you that are listening to this as a podcast, it's also a video that you can see on YouTube, and you can see Mark and I laughing and stuff. But I do think today's going to be a very valuable podcast for my listeners, and I've
Yeah.
been looking forward to having you on for a long time because, and we talked about this a little bit in the our prep for today's episode, is that especially with my architectural mill workers, the guys that are putting bids in for big tenant improvement jobs, it's just a black hole that they feed 15-hour work chunks of estimating into, and then they just hope and pray,
Right.
and that's no good.
No. No,
So
I can cover. Yeah. I mean, it's such a, sorry, I kind of cut you off there, but I'm going to go on a bit of a riff here. It's such a kind of black hole in general. So many people misunderstand the quote unquote bidding slash RFP slash RFQ process.
yeah,
And it's not as complicated as it sounds, but there are a few things that could substantially improve your chances of winning a request for a quote or a request for proposal or a bid, or whichever you're competing on, especially when it comes to large corporations. There's process that goes behind that, and a lot of it comes down to how the procurement person thinks.
yeah. Well, eager to get to that. I'll bet you we got a lot of people listening and watching right now that are just dying to hear all of this. For those of you that are wanting to hear every little bit that Mark says, please remember, as with all my podcasts, there's a transcript produced as well. So you just go to the website, CabinetMakerProfitSystem.com, and then go to the episode where we have Mark, and you'll be able to download a copy of the transcript, which is every spoken word on this interview, including our jokes. And the focus of today, Mark, the reason you're here is what can I do to win more of the bids I want?
Right.
And before you start, let's tell people who the heck you are and why you're here. Can you give us a general intro into Mark Raffan and why you're on this, talking about this?
Yeah. Good question. So I am from the quote unquote dark side. So I spent most of my career on the procurement side for large industrial corporations, large commodity producers, managing category portfolios of up to $150 million a year. That was the spend level that I participated in, and my specialization, the categories that I actually worked in, were industrial trades. So carpentry, scaffolding, electrical, boilermakers, iron workers, you name it, I've looked at it. And so my job for the longest time was hiring people like your listeners. And
They are throwing just barbs at this right now. They're finally, I get to put a face to the name. And, and sorry, Mark, you and I know each other well enough for us to do this, but it's just
yeah,
super valuable stuff because the amount of frustration on
yeah.
the side of a professional provider, just honestly sending stuff into this black hole. I can't wait to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff behind it, but it really comes down to how the other party thinks and what it is they're actually looking for. And so basically, after my career in corporate procurement, I left that, started my negotiation training business where I actually specialize teaching sales teams how to sell to procurement. And so that's how you and I got keyed up on this episode and keen to share my knowledge.
Yeah. And you're the negotiations ninja.
That's right. Yeah. Negotiations Ninja is the
Yeah.
podcast on the website.
There's a little overture to the dark side there. But let's get into things because there is some valuable um, content, like really valuable, and people's businesses are on the line. So let's learn what we can from you while we've got you on the line.
Sure.
Can you tell us all how the world looks from your side of the wall, if I can say that?
Yeah, it's a good question. When people think of procurement people, they view them as cold, data-driven, analytical jerks, so to speak.
Soulless automatons.
Soulless automatons. And to a large extent, that's somewhat true. I mean, you don't come by stereotypes without some sort of truth to it. But it's very, when you think of a procurement person, it's very difficult for them to make decisions without having an apples to apples comparison. And so when you get a quote unquote bid package, and I mean, I'm not going to harp on definitions and the right terminology, but, or an RFP package or an RFQ package, it's designed so that it's easy for the procurement person to do an apples to apples comparison across the board.
Right.
Because they're looking at multiple parties and they need to know what the difference is between your product, the other person's product, and potentially any new market entrants. And so when they're doing that analysis, it's incredibly important that they're able to line it out, because it may be shocking for your listeners to hear this. The vast majority of procurement people have no idea what they're buying. No idea. They're really good at negotiating. They're really good at buying things, but they don't know what it is they're buying. They're usually representing some sort of user group or technical group on the business side. So whether it's operations or maintenance, some kind of technology group, they are the buying representative for that group. And so when you get the RFP package and it's got all the list of requirements and objectives and all that kind of stuff, yeah, that was put together by the procurement person, but with significant influence from whoever the user group is. So when they're going out to market for that, it's critically important that whoever is submitting a proposal or a bid package or whatever it is, they keep that in mind. The procurement person doesn't know what it is you do.
They're not a cabinet maker, right? They're not architecture mill worker. They don't understand any of that stuff. They're a general contractor, or they're working at a general contractor, and they're just there to get the best price.
That's right. Well, not necessarily best price, but best value. So lowest risk, best price on delivery, and it could be a number of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be best price. In fact, rarely is it best price. I think people, especially on the other side of the table, need to think of what is the value that they're providing, which is a very different conversation than price.
So from our side of the wall, it looks like and it sounds like best price, because what we'll hear back is 3 companies get chosen to bid on this job for ABC Corp.
Yeah.
And so all 3 of them clearly would be fine for that company, but then we all get the phone call back that says you're high. And all they have to say to all of us is you're high, and then we go back and we squirrel away and we sharpen our pencils, and maybe none of us were high. But it's so easy, at least from our side, it feels so easy for your side to just say we're high, and we're not. We're bang on. And so it looks like a price-driven decision for us. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to extract value out of that negotiation, right? So it's very typical, especially for buyers or procurement people that aren't necessarily involved in large, complex negotiations. It's a very easy way to come back to you and get you to drop your price before you even start negotiating. So I haven't even asked you to reduce your price. All I've said is, I need you to sharpen your pencil. You're quite high on this. And then, so a salesperson's natural response is like, oh, all right. And so they go back without any information and they drop their price, and they come back and the procurement person's like, wow, let me see what I can do. And they go back and they come back to you as the salesperson and say, I did what I could. Unfortunately, the powers that be need to see you sharpen your pencil a little bit more. Meanwhile, the salesperson, at no point has the salesperson ever said, how much better do I have to get? Or what needs to be improved, or how are you comparing us on an apples to apples basis? Because maybe there's a reason that my prices are a little bit higher than my competitors. Are you looking at the same materials? Are we actually using the same stuff? And so you need to ask questions as a salesperson to get and derive better information from that process.
And Mark, let me just stop for a second, because you hit a really important part. First, most of the people listening to this podcast don't identify themselves as salespeople. They're the owners of the company, or they're the estimator. In reality, they're in a sales position, but not in the way we would typically think about that, in a formal way.
Yeah.
So, but I really like what you said there, which is call back and ask, okay, I'm high, but can you tell me a little bit more about that? Where am I high, or what are you looking for? And I guess it's just opening up the conversation. Just tell me more about that.
Yeah. And really don't, at this point, I would highly recommend you ask open-ended questions. So there's such a thing called a question funnel. And I'm not sure if this is something that you talk about on the podcast, but you start with, it's basically an upside down triangle. Think of a funnel, essentially. Yep. You've got open-ended questions at the top, then probing questions in the middle, and then closed questions at the bottom. This is critically important for any salesperson to understand. And at the end of the day, we're all salespeople. So I think your listeners need to
I get it. Yeah, they get it too.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that funnel, your open-ended questions are, what are the challenges that you're facing, and why did you go to market for this in the first place? Because there's a reason, right? Like, you didn't just go to market for this just because. There's a reason that you went to market for this. So find out what is the reasoning, what's the challenges, and keep asking those open-ended questions to generate conversation, because that's the goal of the open-ended question, is to generate conversation, to get the other party talking. Buyers typically are very closed people. They don't like to give too much information away. And so your job as the salespeople is to get the buyer talking. The only way to do that is by using open-ended questions. Then once you have identified an area that you want to focus on in your funnel with an open-ended question, you start asking probing questions, where you ask things like, tell me more about that. Like, why is that specifically a challenge for you? So if it's pricing, if the procurement person has said, you need to sharpen your pencil on this, the salesperson could ask, maybe you could tell me more about that. What is it that you're having trouble with within my pricing? Is it the price for the material that I'm quoting? Is the material too expensive? Or is it because, you're doing an apples to apples comparison and I actually am higher? Or is it because my product is further away, meaning that there's more delivery cost involved? Like, what is it that you're actually having challenges with? Because if you don't ask those questions as a salesperson, you're going to start to assume that you know what the procurement person is talking about and what they're looking for.
And I think in many cases, obviously I've been speaking to people in this market for years. I think we all assume, and you know what assume stands for. I'll let you finish that. We all assume it's price.
Yeah, and it may not necessarily be price. It may be cost. But cost is total cost. So when you think of a procurement person, they're thinking of total cost of ownership,
right?
Which includes price, but isn't necessarily all about price. It could be transportation, it could be the price itself, it could be the materials that are being used, it could be the risk that's involved. Like, this is higher risk, and so the total cost is going up. It could be the cost for a bunch of different things that are included. So I would be very cautious about using the word price in a negotiation. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So far, this has been a meaty podcast. I think if we stopped right here, there'd be enough info for our listeners, but we're not going to stop here, Mark. I've got you on the line. Yeah, there's more. let me, I think we're going to have you back already to dig into this a little bit more, but let me ask you, time is always an issue. All of us have time challenges. And when we're a growing finished goods company, we have lots of time challenges and just basic ownership challenges. But then we stop bidding, we get a job, then we don't have work in 3 weeks ahead, 3 months ahead. And so we start to panic, we start to bid on everything. Should we be bidding on everything, or let me ask you this, how can I spot a bid I probably will never win?
Good question. So there's a lot of layers to that question. let's start off with, should you be bidding on everything? No, you should not be bidding on everything. You should be bidding on things that you could realistically compete on, not necessarily win, but compete on, because sometimes it's important to put a bid in just for the sake of putting in a bid, so that the other party knows that you are around, right? That you're actually available. So it could be a reason for not necessarily just getting the work, but showing that you're available. And how do you spot a bid that you have no chance of winning? It comes down to core competency at the end of the day, and whether or not you're actually following the instructions of the bid package. So I think a lot of people confuse, am I going to be able to win this versus am I capable of winning this? That's something that only you can answer as a business owner. Do you have capacity? Are you able to take on this job realistically? Will you have to do a massive influx of hiring? And a good bid package is going to be able to identify that, because the procurement person wants to know whether or not there's a risk involved in terms of hiring you. So whether or not you can actually win it often comes down to, are you actually following the instructions of the bid package? Most salespeople, most selling organizations try to get fancy in their bid proposals and restructure the proposal to make it make more sense. Procurement people know that their packages mostly don't make a sense in terms of structure. They know that. It's not a surprise to them.
Wow.
So by putting it in different order doesn't help them, because remember, they have to do an apples to apples comparison. And if you're making it difficult for them to do a comparison,
just throw it out.
Right? Like, you're wasting their time. They're very busy people.
So how do we give ourselves that advantage then? Because bid packages sometimes look crazy, and they ask for levels of detail that you just take time. They're very, very intensive and take us out of our comfort zone, maybe on things we don't understand in our company. And again, we don't know. It's all just usually going to a black hole. So I'll ask the question again. How do we make sure that we put the best bid package forward to give ourselves the best chance of getting in that, at least get me to the phone call where I hear you're high?
So it comes down to features and benefits. And I know it sounds simplistic, but most sales organizations focus a ton on features. Like, this is the best widget architectural design in the whole world, and it's fantastic. And so the procurement person on the other side is like, great. I really could care less whether or not it's the best architectural design in the world. What does it do for me? Where's the benefit to what you're proposing? So that's very different than just proposing just the feature, because remember, the person that's reviewing your bid is not an architectural design person. Right. They're not a tradesperson. So make sure that you're actually illustrating the benefit, and make sure the benefit's right up front. So when you're putting together a bid package and you have your cover letter, you're actually summarizing what's in the bid package. Here's the feature, here's the benefit. Here's the feature, here's the benefit. Here's the feature, here's the benefit.
Give me an example. And if you can't do architectural woodwork or cabinetry, do electrical contractor, do something trades-based. If you can, what's a feature and what's a benefit, so that our listeners understand what you mean in that?
So not super familiar with cabinetry, so I'll make an example. So the cabinetry provides more room in the cabinet, whatever it is, more room than your standard cabinet, and that's a feature. The benefit to the organization is that there's more volume, you can fit more stuff in it. That means lower costs. That means they can install a lot more of them for lower costs, which means that there's a huge benefit in terms of cost savings for the organization.
Okay.
So it may seem obvious to the person proposing what the feature's benefit is, but it's not obvious. What's obvious to you isn't obvious because you're in it every single day.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the major shortcomings of a lot of people's proposals, is that they think what they're saying is obviously people should know that because we create more volume, that's going to create cost savings because there's less to install, and it's way better for the homeowner or for the home manufacturer,
Right.
for the builder.
Right. So
Not
the feature.
necessarily true.
So in this industry, it's very common for tenant improvements or for commercial work that we get a set of drawings and we bid on it. So they tell us what the cabinetry is going to look like, what the features are going to look like. So I suppose if I'm going to, let me rephrase it to you in a language that I think our listeners would normally get, and tell me if I'm on the right track. So the feature might be, we're a local provider, just as an example. And by local, I mean we are within 6 miles or 6 kilometers, wherever you are in the world. We're in 6 miles of the install location, which means that in the event of install deficiency or remeasurements, it's very easy for us to get there. We have timed it out, and it only takes us 13 minutes at peak traffic to drive to that location should we need to. That's still
still a feature.
That's still a feature, not the benefit?
Still, the benefit is that there's lower cost associated to having me that close. Right? So yeah, I'm closer.
I thought the benefit was that I'm close.
The benefit, so that the feature is that you're close. The benefit is that it doesn't cost you anything for me to come and fix anything that's wrong.
Okay, so that's an example.
So the amount of time for me to respond is a benefit. That's the benefit. Think of it in terms of who you're selling to. On the other side of the table is, why do I care that you're close? I don't care that you're close. I care that you're close because you can respond faster. That's a benefit. I care that you're close because it'll cost me less. That's a benefit. I care that you're close because now my customers are happier because you can respond faster. That's a benefit. Just the fact that you're closer is just a feature.
Perfect. This is good, Mark. This is really good. And so you're saying that can go on the cover page because, as you know, in these RFQ packages, we're very tightly tied as to what we can and can't do. We can't add additional pages, nothing like that.
Yeah, and so further to the feature benefit conversation, what I would suggest is that you name it out, and a lot of people, what they try to do in bid packages is they'll put their policies and procedures as the feature right inside the package and not necessarily as appendices, and that takes up a lot of your room in your package. That counts towards page count.
Policies and procedures? Sorry, you lost me there.
Yeah. So for example, if the buyer or the procurement person has a requirement for you to show your safety manual or your safety policies or how safe your organization is, what a lot of people will do, what a lot of selling organizations will do, is that they'll include those policies and procedures or those manuals right in the package. That counts towards your page count. Don't do that. List that as an appendices and just say, and give a summary on your safety stuff, right? So if instead of your full policies and procedures, you've got one page on how you meet the safety needs of the organization, and then you've got an appendix referenced at the bottom of that page that says, for further information, please see page XYZ, Appendix B, where we will go into greater detail or whatever it is, right? So that's a massive space-saving tool that your listeners can use on an ongoing basis to be able to save. Because if a bid package is really complex and difficult to go through, and a buyer has to like dig through your policies and procedures to get to the answer that they want, garbage. It's going straight in the garbage. So identify the areas that they want and then just reference the policies and procedures manual, your safety manual, as an appendix.
So let me ask on a tech side, because some of our listeners are very tech savvy.
Right.
Is a hyperlink okay? Here's a hyperlink to our website.
Absolutely. So whenever you're referencing it as a hyperlink, though, make sure the hyperlink works. Because there's been so many times where it hasn't, and if it doesn't work, chances are they're not going to get back to you. And if they do get back to you, you're already in their bad books.
Wow. Okay. So for those of you that aren't familiar, a hyperlink is where the text in your note, your email, etc., comes up in blue. And when somebody clicks on that, it automatically takes them to a preset web page, and that web page has whatever information you're choosing to have there. In this case, we're talking about your policies and procedures or your safety policies, etc. OSHA, whatever it might be. Thanks, Mark. Well, that's great. Okay, let me change the gears a little bit. And this is fantastic. I mean, I know I'm having you back already. What are the secrets? What can I do? Here, I'm going to start with an open question. I'm using your Funnel. Huh? You know what's amazing is that from the world of professional sales, which is where I come from, and the world of professional procurement, we actually use the same tools.
Yeah.
We just repurpose them for whatever side of the wall, as I've called it, that we're on. And
Right.
so it's really interesting the way that they're so similar. And yet many business owners, I don't want to be a sales guy and I've never been a procurement guy. And so they push those away when in reality, that's the skills the estimators needs, or that's the skill they need negotiation skills on both sides.
Right.
But back to my question, what can I do to win more of the bids that I want?
Oh man. Focus on quality, not quantity. The amount of bid packages that procurement people receive daily from stuff that they have out in the market that is poor is substantial. And the bar isn't high, really, honestly.
Wow.
I can count on one hand the amount of proposals that I've received that have actually met the requirements in the instructions.
Really?
I know, yeah, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. And that's the scary part, is if people just followed the instructions, they will already be in the top 10%, top 5% of people submitting bids.
That's crazy. And you guys know that sometimes we get wonky RFPs, RFQs, RFIs.
Totally.
Too bad for us. Got to match.
Just follow the instructions. Now, you may want to call them back and say, hey, this doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Would it be all right for you if I submitted a separate proposal that I think aligns to your needs more? This is the key. Don't submit a different proposal in place of what they have asked for. Submit a separate proposal from what they have asked for, because they still have to do the apples to apples comparison on what they have asked for, unless they go back and totally rejig their questions and then resend out the RFP, which they're not going to do because it takes way too much time. Rather, send a separate proposal and say, I think this meets your needs more. I'd like for you to consider this as an alternative. Here's why I think it makes sense for the organization, and go that route. So that's really important.
I was under the impression that we're literally not allowed to do that.
No, that's not true. You just have to ask them if you can do that.
So ask. Again, everything in life, Mark, comes down to asking.
Yeah, if you're not asking, you're not getting, right? So make sure you're asking. It really comes down to the person who's making the purchase. If you're going to call the purchaser, the procurement person, and say, look, I'm going to submit a separate proposal to you. I think it's going to meet your needs more. I think you're going to get a ton of value out of it. Don't worry, I'm obviously going to answer all the questions that you have in your existing proposal, but doesn't it make sense for me to submit this as well? And then you can see which one makes sense most for you. No procurement person in their right mind is going to say no to that, because if you're going to show more value, I'm going to take more value. That's great. Fantastic. Show me how I can make more money.
Or save time.
Or save time, or save money, or create better experience for my customers. Anything like that is good.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So focus on quality, not quantity.
Big time.
Answer the questions. So follow the bid process to the T. And you said 5% actually follow the instructions?
Yeah, it's alarming how few actually follow the instructions. Alarming. Actually scary how few follow the instructions.
I think what we might not be hearing is the yelling and screaming of the people listening to the podcast now who say, none of you guys follow the same format when you send us the RFQs.
And none of them will. And so there's no way for you to, you're going to have...
We can't systematize it. We can't make
you've got to, it's tough because you can't systematize it fully, but there are areas that everyone asks for, right? Everyone asks for health and safety. Everyone asks for performance metrics. Everyone asks for material costs. So all of that stuff can be systematized, and then it's just going to be plug and play in terms of format.
Right. And so if they've got section 1, subsection A, I need to have in my answer section 1, subsection A.
That's right. Like follow it to the T. It's only going to help you. And I know there are some of your listeners right now who are going, but the bid packages are stupid and they're not lined up properly and they don't make sense. And like, yeah, we get it. Okay, fine. But just follow the instructions. I know it's painful. Just do it.
Hey, when you put together IKEA furniture, it doesn't matter whether you follow the instructions or not. That stuff will not stand. Okay. So this is great. So focus on quality of responses, not quantity of responses.
Yeah.
Answer the bleeping questions that you're asking. What's another thing we can do to win more of the bids that we want? How? Let me ask you, this is what I need to know. How much can I phone you? Given that they quite often say, whatever questions you propose, we have to ask and answer to everybody on the bid train.
That's right. And so they do. They actually have to legally do that. So whenever you're calling them, and I get that, some salespeople are like, well, I don't want to bug them, and they get really upset when I call them so many times. So don't call them that many times. Read the package, write down all your questions, and call them once. You don't have to call them a million times. If you've got all your questions lined up, just call them and say, hey, can I have 5-10 minutes of your time just to go through these questions? And chances are the buyer is going to go, hey, can you write them down on an email, send them to me? I'll try and get them answered as best I can. And then we'll send out a revised question answer set to the entire group. Right. Yeah, that's fine. Because remember, the person that you're asking doesn't know anything about architectural design. So if you've got specific questions around the project, they're not going to know the answer. So asking them for that kind of stuff is fairly useless. But asking them about, can I propose this as a fixed price versus time and material or whatever it is, that's a legitimate question that you can ask. But if they have asked for it a certain way in the bid package, make sure you give them that answer, because they're still going to do the apples to apples comparison and then make a separate proposal for whatever it is you want to do. I think the key thing that a lot of people don't do in these circumstances is they don't demonstrate value. And what I mean by value is, how are you as the salesperson or the architectural design company or whatever it is that you're doing, how are you delivering and demonstrating value to the person that's buying or potentially buying from you? So right. Where have you done the work before? How have you done similar things? Show me where you've done the work before. Show me the testimonials that you've done before. Show me the value that you're creating. And then the thing that no one does, but every procurement person looks for, is how are you reducing my risk?
So where do I answer that if there's no, section 1, subsection A that says, show me how you risk?
Put it into the finances. So you can add it as part of the financials that you're sending. So procurement people want to know, obviously, how much it costs, but there's also a cost to risk. So if you know that you're a higher priced alternative in the market, and you know that you're going to be coming in a little bit more expensive than your competition, how are you? What's the trade-off for that? Because I'm not going to pay you more just because you're more.
Yeah.
So why are you more? Are you less risky because you're more stable? You have a better workforce. You have more people that I can access on an ongoing basis to reduce my, fluctuations in staff costs. So in the high peak building summer season, I don't have to worry about whether or not your trade's going to actually show up. Is that why you're higher priced? Because then there's an overhead cost to that, and then your higher price makes sense, but you're reducing my risk.
And so how do you propose that I put that in the finance package about those elements of risk? Thank you for answering that, by the way, because that was in my mind. How do I show you I'm less risky? My CNC is newer than the other guys. My air quality system is better. Where do I put that in the finance package?
Yeah, and so you can either put it in the finance section or in the operations section, because usually in an operations section, they'll ask for some sort of performance metrics. Or if they're not asking for performance metrics, you can show them how much better you perform than your competition. And that's a benefit to the organization, right? So how much better are you performing, and what does that mean in terms of a benefit to the organization that's hiring you? If you Go
Are you
ahead.
talking about benchmarking, like going and getting industry benchmark reports so that you can show your operational metrics, your KPIs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Because
Absolutely.
I do benchmarking for this industry, and I'll be very blunt. Most guys don't even care. I get very little response on it. But benchmarking is something I can actually include in my RFP process and
I
say,
think you should.
here's the industry and here's where we are.
I think you should. Especially if you're better than the industry
Yeah.
benchmark.
If you're lower, no. But
If you're lower, don't include that. But if you're much better, then you should be including that, because that's an illustration of how well your organization performs. So, for example, if you're producing XYZ cabinet faster than industry, that means you're potentially giving them an X percentage savings off of the industry average. So if you're using the average cabinet maker, you're creating savings in efficiency for them.
right.
That's a savings. That's real money. You need to tell them about that, because without that information, they're running blind.
Yeah. Wow. I'm blown away by today's interview. I'm saying thanks already, and I know the feedback I'm going to get. It's funny that you brought up benchmarking again, because I do industry benchmarking, and I guess I'm guilty of not telling my listeners the features and benefits well enough, because it's out there. The information's only available if I go out and provide it, but it's there. And so I didn't realize that was such an important part of your world, looking from your side of the wall at my side of the wall.
Big time. Big time. I mean, some of the stuff the procurement people are going to be able to ascertain from the bid process itself, because that's essentially what the RFP or bid process is about, is to be able to compare the different people in the industry. The key, though, is to be able to show that you're better, right? To show that value, which comes down to the features and benefits thing that we were talking about earlier. Are you actually showing a benefit? By saying that you're better is one thing, but what does that actually mean to the person that's buying your services? It sounds simplistic. I know, like, people are like, well, obviously it means that, but it's not obvious.
Let me change the gears here a little bit. And this is, as you know, this is Dom's way of looking at things. When all of you purchasers go for lunch.
We don't go for lunch. We hang out alone. We're lone wolves. We don't like each other.
On your starships, in your own galaxies, pondering the big questions of the universe. But when you guys do sit down and talk about all the bids you're getting in, when you talk about us, the providers,
yeah,
what are your big complaints? I mean, I think one of them is we don't follow the request.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's huge. That happens all the time. Every single time procurement people hang out, they talk about how no one follows the instructions. So that's a big one. The other one is just not knowing what it is you're providing, because it doesn't seem obvious to us.
Like when we don't know what we're providing to you?
No, not necessarily. What we don't know what you're providing to us because you haven't made it obvious. The other big thing that procurement people bitch and complain about, which you guys won't hear about, is that we actually negotiate more internally than we do externally.
What?
Yeah. So, and it sounds weird, but it's really difficult to get alignment internally on the requirements of an RFP package, because there's generally multiple stakeholders that are involved. And it may be very difficult to get alignment from them on what it is they want as their primary objective. So there's a natural conflict that exists between procurement and operations a lot of the time. Procurement's looking for best value, all that kind of stuff, and operations is looking for best product that meets their needs. Sometimes those two don't necessarily mesh. And so what we're trying to establish when we chat with someone internally is, how do we rank those competing priorities? Because ultimately one is going to become more important than the other.
Yeah.
And then what weighting do we put on it? So for example, in an operations-based company, generally speaking, especially in industrial, some of the most important things are going to be your safety, your productivity, whether or not you actually provide what I've asked you, and then things like price, delivery, payment terms, all that kind of stuff. Those sort of fall below that.
Isn't that funny? Price is not the first thing, and yet we all think it is.
Yeah,
And that's the same everywhere.
Yeah, not necessarily, right? Like price, people believe that price is the most important thing. And not to say that it's not important, don't get me wrong. It's very important, but not most of the time. Most of the time, it's actually whether or not you can actually deliver what I've asked you to deliver.
For the price.
Because, yeah, for the price. Because there's a cost to not getting what I want. If I hire you based on lowest price, and you screw it up,
I close the doors, I go out of business, I can't do it.
There's a cost.
Massive.
Right?
And it probably comes back to you.
Now I have to fire you, which
Yeah.
there's a cost to. I have to get you off site, which there's a cost to. You have to get all of your gear, your equipment, your labor, all of that. You have to get all of that off site. Now I have to hire someone else, which costs money. They have to get acclimatized to the site, go through all the safety training, all that kind of stuff. There's new ramp up costs. The cost of change is huge.
Yeah.
So
the other thing is the other trades are backing up, waiting for me to be done.
Yeah, and so my production is slowing down. Everything's getting worse. So yeah, price is important, but I want to make sure you can actually do the job.
Wow. Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
If I could guarantee that I would have you as a guest here again, what would you say?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to, because you've opened up so many doors of possibility and opportunity for us to talk about. I'm eager to see what our listeners have to say about this, because this is just outstanding. Excellent stuff. Let's wrap it up here, but people may want to get in touch with you before this even goes, well, not before it goes live, they won't hear it. Although I can think of a couple of my clients that I'm going to send this recording to before it even goes live. So there's people on my inside track that are going to see this before everybody else. How do we get in touch with you if we need to?
Best way to get in touch with me is to go to my website, negotiations.ninja. That's negotiation with an S, .ninja. And on there's blog posts, podcast episodes, ways to get in touch with me. I'm very active on social media, so you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Raffan. But I'm all over the place. Just type in Negotiations Ninja. I should be the first result that pops up.
Right. And for those of you listening, Raffan is spelled RAFFAN, and it's negotiations.ninja.
Yes.
And
not .com.
What's that?
Not .com.
Not .com. It's just negotiations.ninja. That's an interesting domain ender.
Yeah, I should have thought of that before I picked it. But
that's all right. All right. It makes you stand out. It makes you different. And I subscribe to your newsletter. As a matter of fact, I just saw one come into my inbox, I think on the weekend is when you send it. And the title is Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
That seems like such a, I can't wait to read it. I haven't had a chance. We're recording on a Monday. Maybe I'm sharing too much, but I do have that pegged to read. So I can't wait to hear what you have.
I think you're going to like it.
Yeah. Mark, thank you from the bottom of my heart for answering this, because the frustration that I hear from our listeners and from the people I deal with is insane. I mean, this is the question. This is the question that the people providing TI or commercial work deal with all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And so I think we've started to peel back the layers there. I know I'm going to have you back. So thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth to the topic, Dom. It can get a lot deeper. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. I hope that you got a ton of value. Cabinet Maker Profit System. It's a long name, but you know what we do here. There's just no secret. There's no surprise. Everything we do here is for the benefit of business owners who run architectural millwork and cabinet making shops. You guys are out there making the last thing people see before they go to bed and the first thing they see when they wake up. You employ a ton of people, you do good work, and you deserve to have the best information, which is what we try to provide here. And I think Mark knocked it out of the park. So I'm going to say thank you one more time there.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.